If
One
that
of
were,
those
if
one of
that
those
had been
made-
planted in the Washington Monument Base 200 years ago, that's proof of aliens. So
We just put it in there to match the bunnies on your tie in royal blue.
thank you. Thank you.
And just a reminder, the live stream has started, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioner McCormick. This is Michael. I hope you can hear me. I'm driving, and I should be stationary in about 10 minutes, so I'll get on screen then. Did you all hear me?
I heard you, Michael.
Okay, great.
I don't know how many Zoom meetings I watch where people are doing the Zoom from their phone as they're driving. And I'm like, no, look at the road, dude. Look at the road.
No, I'm looking at the road. I just want to make sure you can hear me, so I don't want to miss anything.
It's good, Michael.
But it is hot in Texas, I can tell you that, man. Whew.
I was just thinking about you, Michael, thinking like it's hot in Houston. It's hot in Austin. So,
Wow.
Hi, Michael. Long time.
Yeah, hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. I better go mute my house phone because it'll ring even though it never rings through this meeting. I'll be back.
I'm going to give people a few more minutes to sign in here. Also, we have to wait for Allison to get back.
I'm here. And now I'm unmuted too.
Okay. Allison, can you ballpark the list to see if we have critical mass? I think we do.
I think we do too.
Okay. Is the staff ready for us to proceed?
I am.
Great. Okay. Thank you all for being here. This is the annual meeting of the Board of Advisors for the United States Election Assistance Commission. I am Michael Yockey, Chair of the Board of Advisors. I'm joined by my colleagues here today, including my fellow officers, Sarah Johnson Ball, our Vice Chair, and Allison McLaughlin, our Secretary. We are also pleased to welcome our designated federal officer, Commissioner Chrissy McCormick, as well as Commissioners Ben Hovland, Commissioner Ray Palmer, Donald Palmer as well. And thank you all for being here today. I was going to indulge for something that is not on the TikTok, which I just thought of, and Commissioner, our designated federal officer, Commissioner McCormick, and perhaps the other commissioners as well. If you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to start the meeting, I think that would be a great way to start.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag,
of the United States
United States of America,
and to the
to
republic
the republic,
for which it stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
with
justice
justice
for all.
Thank you very much. We now call this meeting to order, and I am going to request that I recognize the secretary, Allison McLaughlin, to call the roll.
I'm going to go in order of appointing organizations from the National Governors Association. I have Mary Catherine Ott,
Present.
Michelle Woods.
Present.
From the National Conference of State Legislatures, I have Representative Kevin Bratcher
Present.
and Senator Daniel Ivy Soto. We'll come back. From the National Association of Secretaries of State, I have Secretary Jim Condos
Here.
and Secretary Paul Pate. Check that. From the National Association of State Election Directors, I have Keith Ingram
Here.
and Linda Lamone.
Here.
From the National Association of Counties, I have Ricky Hatch.
Here.
And I am here as well. From the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I have Elizabeth Howard.
Here.
From the Election Center, I have Tim Mattice
Here.
and Dean Logan.
Present.
From the International Association of Government Officials, Michael Winn
Here.
and Neil Kelly.
Here.
From the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, Michael Yaki is here. David Cladney. Who I believe we have a proxy for, is that correct? I'll note the
Yes,
proxy.
yes, I hold this proxy.
I note that. From the Architectural and Transportation Barrier Compliance Board, I have Marc Guthrie.
Here, proxy for Jim Dixon.
Noted. And Patrick Cannon.
Present.
From the Department of Justice, Richard Pilger
Present.
and Chris Herren.
Present.
From the Federal Voting Assistance Program, David Byrne.
Present.
From the Speaker of the House, Philip Stark.
Present.
From the House Minority Leader, Elliot Burke. We'll check back. From the Senate Majority Leader, Sarah Ball Johnson.
Here.
From the Senate Minority Leader, Barbara Simons.
Here.
From the House Administration Chair, Gregory Moore.
Present.
And Lawrence Norden.
Present.
From House Administration Ranking Member John Fogarty. We'll check back, and Don Gray.
Present.
From Rules and Administration, Jim Dixon. I think we have a proxy.
Proxy Marc Guthrie.
That's correct.
And Mark Ritchie. We have a
I have
proxy
it.
there as well. Got
I
it.
have his proxy.
From Rules and Administration, Senate Rules and Administration Committee Chair, we have Rick Stream
Present.
and Shane Scholler.
Present.
And I believe we also have both the designated federal officer and the assistant designated federal officer present. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum. I will count and provide the exact numbers in the chat.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. President, this is Daniel Ivy Soto with the National Conference of State Legislators present.
Noted. Is there anyone else who is present whose name I did not, any appointed members that we missed? Mr. Chair, we're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We are going to begin with some remarks by the honored chair of the United States Election Assistance Commission, Mr. Donald Palmer. Mr. Palmer, Chair Palmer, take it away.
Well, thank you, Chairman Yaki. As many as you know, I'm EAC Chairman Don Palmer. Happy to be addressing EAC Board of Advisors and everyone joining us today virtually. So elections are the foundation of our democracy, and you are the stewards of those elections. While there may be divisions in our country over ideology or policy, you remain the foundation of that democracy. So I encourage you to be strong and long-suffering as you serve the communities across the country. For many of you, every day you facilitate the right to vote, the primary expression of speech for millions of Americans. Your courage and commitment allows our republic to move forward. Your dedication to duty and service to voters allows the nation to be the beacon of democracy around the world. As my fellow commissioners and I said after the November election, the EAC has confidence in the state and local election administrators who ran the 2020 election and the voting system certified by the EAC. As you, we respect the tens of thousands of poll workers and election workers that make the administration of elections possible in this country. In 2020, officials overcame an historic pandemic while managing record turnout and providing Americans safe opportunities to cast their ballot. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to again recognize and thank the Board of Advisors, the members, and all the election officials who worked tirelessly last year to ensure a safe, secure, accessible, and accurate election that protected the health of voters and our election workers. While the EAC is evaluating the lessons that can be learned from the 2020 elections, we are also looking forward to 2022 and beyond in the ways we can better help election officials and voters across the country. Earlier this year, the EAC commissioners unanimously approved VVSG 2.0, paving the way for a new generation of voting systems. I'd like to thank the Board of Advisors for your input in the development of these voting system standards. Now we look forward to making VVSG 2.0 a reality. And as you'll hear more about today during today's meeting, the EAC is now working on the steps to implement the VVSG 2.0. And we value your continued feedback on important topics like the life cycle policy and the new features of the testing manual. We also hope to gather your feedback on the EAC's effort to develop an evaluation and testing program for election supporting technologies. I'm very proud of what the EAC staff accomplished in 2020 and how we have continued to develop our programming so we can better serve election officials and voters. We look to you for additional ideas on how the EAC can serve election officials and the voters. Thank you again for everyone for joining this meeting. I'll pass this back to Chairman Yaki. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Palmer. I'd also like to recognize our designated federal official, Commissioner Chrissy McCormick, for some opening remarks as well.
Thank you, Chairman Yaki, and hello, everyone. It's good to see so many of your faces who I haven't seen in too long. I'm sad we're not in person again this year, but thank you to all the members who are joining us virtually today, and also to those who are watching the live stream. I'm honored to be the Board of Advisors DFO this year. Thank you to all the Board of Advisors members for your dedication in serving this board. Your input and feedback is valued and critical to the success of the EAC. We have a lot on today's agenda. I'm excited for you to hear about some recent updates and also to hear your feedback on various programs and initiatives, as Chairman Palmer said, as we look forward. With so much to get to, I'd like to briefly provide a high-level legal overview, especially for our newer members, of the law and governing documents of the Board of Advisors. The Board of Advisors was created by the Help America Vote Act of 2002 and is a federal advisory committee. The Federal Advisory Committee Act sets general requirements that all federal advisory committees have to follow, such as having a charter and a designated federal officer assigned, maintaining minutes of the meetings, and making the Board of Advisors records and meetings available to the public. The Board of Advisors charter is voted on by the EAC commissioners every 2 years. This charter describes high-level matters such as the objectives and duties of the Board of Advisors. The bylaws are adopted and maintained by the Board of Advisors itself and detail how meetings are conducted and election roles of officers and how recommendations to the EAC are officially adopted. HAVA and this body's charter say that the Board of Advisors' duty is to provide guidance and recommendations to the EAC on a number of topics, such as the Voluntary Voting Systems Guidelines, EAC best practice documents, and the EAC's mission and program goals. Congress created the Board of Advisors to provide informed feedback to the EAC from a diverse group of experts with experience in election administration, civil rights, disability rights, technology, and security. Through the help of this body at meetings like today's, the EAC is better able to serve all election officials and voters. And we hope you take this responsibility as members of the Board of Advisors seriously as you hear and participate in the various topics for discussion on today's agenda. And I hope to see you all in person next year. And with that, I will turn it back to Chairman Yaki. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Board members, we are beginning a new 2-year term. Many of you some of you are newly appointed. Many of you are returnees, such as myself. Part of that 2-year cycle is the administration of the oath of office to all of us. And I am going to ask our Commissioner McCormick to please administer the oath of office. As much as I know all of us want to hear our own voices, I would advise keeping you all on mute and just sort of mouth along it so that we keep it going. Commissioner McCormick.
Perfect. Thank you, Chairman Yaki. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter. So help me God. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We now are going to turn to the heart of our agenda. So if Rebecca, if you could put the agenda on the screen for everyone to see. Perhaps in a slightly larger font. Comprising the entire agenda, are we all the way to the bottom? I think we can scroll it down a little bit to put approval of agenda at the top to make sure that we have everything included for people to see. So could you scroll down just a bit on the page? Keep on going. Keep on going. Perfect. Okay, doke. So if you can all put your eyes on this, and for the viewers at home, this is our agenda. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. If you so wish, please unmute yourself and make yourself known and state your name.
Mr. Chairman, Allison McLaughlin, I move to adopt the agenda.
There's a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a second? Keith, I see you're unmuted.
Second.
Marc Guthrie is second. If there's any opposition, I'm going to ask that you unmute yourself and say you have opposition. In the absence of opposition, the agenda is adopted without objection. Okay, so let us move then to the next item. We now need to approve the minutes. Rebecca, if you could put the minutes on the screen. These are all emailed to all of you, but just in case, let's put it on there for full transparency. And I'm not going to ask her to scroll through the whole thing, but unless someone wishes to. Does anyone wish for us to scroll the entire agenda, the entire minutes through for review? If so, please unmute yourself and make yourself known. Hearing none, I will assume that everyone has read the minutes or is prepared to vote on them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the?
Yeah, Michael Winn, so moved.
Michael Winn has made the motion to approve. Is there a second?
Allison Blackman, I'll second.
I'm sorry, there are two people speaking.
Yeah, Keith Ingram.
Keith Ingram has seconded. And again, if there are any objections, please unmute yourself and register. Hearing none, no objections. The minutes are adopted without objection. We'll move on to the next item. And I know for the viewers on YouTube, this is really exciting. We're going through a TikTok, but we are not going to do a TikTok video unless, of course, the members decide we want to do one. Okay, we are now going to begin the elections process, and I'm going to first announce the members of the Election Certification Committee who I selected to steward this endeavor. They are Shane Scholler, who is the chair, Elizabeth Howard, and Barbara Simons. They comprise the Elections Committee. And now I will recognize the assistant DFO and our former colleague, Tina Barton, to walk us through the all-important elections process for the our officers. I would note for everyone that we're only using the electronic process for the officers. For the votes later on the bylaw and resolutions, we will do so by normal roll call vote. So, Ms. Barton, the floor is yours.
Chairman Yaki, it's an honor to be with all of you today. You will be receiving two separate emails that will come to you. One of those emails will have your link to the ballot. The separate email will have your ballot password. So pursuant to the Board of Advisors bylaws, the election will be by secret ballot. As this is a virtual meeting, the procedure will be different than it would be if we were in an in-person meeting. We have a process by which the members can confidentially cast their ballot via checkbox. Each member, again, will receive an email with a link to submit their ballot via checkbox. That email is going to say that it's coming from noreply@checkbox.com. It will have my name attached to it so that you can look for that. The second email is coming from me directly that will have your password for voting. Please remember that the password is case sensitive. The checkbox tool reflects the ballot information and ensures that all ballots are received within the time provided during the meeting. You may vote for no more than one candidate in each race. Please let us know in the chat if you're having any problems with your link, or you may call, text, or email me. But the chat will be the quickest way. We have Tyler Herman who will be watching the chat for any issues. Thank you.
Ms. Barton, just as a matter of procedure, I just checked my inbox. I got my password, but I did not receive a link. Is the password coming first and then the link, or should I be looking at my spam?
The link should be coming out. It's possible maybe the link went to your other email address. The challenge is that several of you provide multiple email addresses to us. I can double check on yours in particular, Chairman Yaki.
Yeah,
mine arrived after the password. Mine arrived after the password. I would check.
Yeah, mine just arrived after the password as well. Okay, so members, the nominees, and there's only one contested election, and that is for chair. So, but I will not announce the winners for the other two because that would be taking away the role of the Election Certification Committee, and I do not want to do that. The poll will be available for 30 minutes beginning now. We'll make a 15-minute and 5-minute announcement as the agenda progresses to remind yourself, in case you're one of those folks who likes to wait till the very last minute because it makes it more exciting for you. But until, as of now, you may begin the voting process. And again, use the chat for any technical or other issues that you may wish to raise with the staff. We are moving along quite well. I am now going to recognize, so voting has begun. It's all exciting. This is how America works. And we're going to now I'm going to recognize Secretary McLaughlin, who is also chair of the Bylaws Committee, to give the Bylaws Committee report. There was one bylaw amendment offered for this meeting today. Bylaws require a 2/3 vote of members present and proxies required and voting to pass. So this is something that's more than just a majority. So I'm going to ask Ms. McLaughlin to give her the report of the Bylaws Committee. Secretary McLaughlin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Bylaws Committee met on May 21st, 2021, and we unanimously recommended the amendment for consideration by the full board that I think is going to be displayed on your screen. The recommendations are that in the bylaws, we insert a new section C under Article 4 that sets qualifications for chair, that the chair shall alternate at the expiration of each cycle between members who at the time of their nomination serve as election officials and members who at the time of their nomination serve as non-election officials. We then propose to insert a new subsection C under Article 4, Section D1, specifying that if the chair is a current election official, if the current chair is an election official, the Election Certification Committee shall only solicit nominations of non-election officials for the office of chair. And if the current chair is not an elections official, the Election Certification Committee shall only solicit nominations of election officials. We would then amend Article 4, Section D1E, which is renumbered as F, to have the current process apply only for nominations for the offices of vice chair and secretary. And then there's a new subsection G under Article 4, Section D1, that in the event the Election Certification Committee receives no nomination meeting the requirements for that rotation cycle, and no member meeting the requirements for that rotation cycle is nominated from the floor, then a nomination of any member will be accepted from the floor. I will just note that it is, I know there has been a great deal of discussion, really, I think from the creation of the Board of Advisors on the selection process and options put forward for how this ought to be conducted. And the Bylaws Committee discussed that history as well as discussing the language that had been put forward. And so we came up with what we thought was a modified version of the bylaws amendment that had been proposed that accomplishes that rotation and reflects that in the bylaws. I do see at least one hand in the air. Mr. Chairman, I defer to you on how you want to manage this process.
Sure. In fact, yes, let's, people who have questions about this, please unmute yourself and identify yourself to be recognized, and I will recognize you and you may ask you. Oh, Mr. Kelly, I see. Mr. Kelly,
Yep.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on, I guess, the purpose of this and what problem we're trying to solve. As an election official, and I'm sure my colleagues on here will attest to this, we have a lot of experience dealing with legislative bodies, whether they're local, whether they're state, et cetera. And the rotation for, let's say, mayor pro tem or chairman of a board takes place among the members, and they vote on that individual. They're not rotated through by category, they're not rotated through by their profession, et cetera. And so I guess, A, what problem are we trying to solve? Because I think anyone could come forward and offer to serve as chair, number one. And then number two, if you have a category of individuals and somebody just doesn't want to serve as chair, I know there's a provision in what you put in here for that, but it seems like we're pinning people against the wall. So I would love an explanation.
Sure. Mr. Kelly, as the author of the amendment, I will give the explanation, at least my proposed justification. In my years on the EAC, I've noted that it's for lack of a better word, I think that it is something that I think is appropriate given the fact that we are divided essentially into two groups. There are which is reflected in the amendment. There are voting officials, and there are sort of the non-voting officials who comprise a variety of different jurisdictions. In my observation, and this is just my observation, but it's also been borne out by discussions I've had with various members of the Board of Advisors, there is some desire to ensure that we have balance. And in fact, I would note that in the last election, it was raised that by some that election officials it came from election officials themselves who were concerned that they did not feel they were adequately represented in the numbers on the executive committee at the time. This is a way to sort of address that issue from both sides and to say that we will ensure a rotation to ensure both. One, I think that it will do something that I think is needed, which is to encourage more people to get involved on all sides, knowing that this rotation will allow people from the various sides in order to put themselves up for nomination. And I think it's good to keep that healthy sense of balance in the leadership of the Board of Advisors, which quite frankly, in my years, has not always been there. And I think that, and when it shifted to another side, others brought it up from their point of view, and I think this strikes that balance. And that's the reason why I am with you. I've been an elected official. I've been where these kinds of things rotate all the time, and rotation, I think, doesn't hurt. But on boards of supervisors or city councils or what have you, they're all people who are elected. We are all appointed. They are people who represent a single thing, which is the people who they were elected by. We represent the interests of various parties, not just our appointed officials, but the constituencies of those appointed officials who we care about. And because of that, ensuring a regular rotation of those interests and those viewpoints, I think, would strengthen the operation of the Board of Advisors and the Executive Committee going forward.
Well, I appreciate the explanation. It occurs to me, though, that, and you mentioned this earlier, that we're participating in what we do in America, which is a democratic process, and we're casting our ballots for individuals who choose to run. And so I'm going to be opposed to the bylaws amendment just on principle, but I do appreciate your explanation, and I understand where you're coming from. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there other discussion? Any other people wish to take advantage of the raise hand thing, which I forgot to look at?
Mr. Chairman?
I believe that sounds like Daniel Ivey Soto, Senator Soto.
It is Daniel Ivey Soto, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I am calling in on my phone, so I don't have the ability to raise my hand virtually. And you were not able to see my hand raised physically. I virtually rise to also to decline to support this proposal, and I do so actually as the person who was, shall we say, the victim of some of this discussion last year about election official versus non-election official. And in my case, what I found divisive about that discussion that existed then, and as this proposal would create structurally if we adopted it, is that while I am currently a state senator, I'm a former Associate Deputy Secretary of State. I'm a former state elections director of my state, and was active in NASAD. And so under this proposal, I would be permanently, structurally categorized as a non-election official. I am on my cell phone right now because I am driving to a somewhat remote area in my state right now for a conference of the county clerks of my state, who I resource as a technical assistance provider, and who, frankly, they employ me, and yet this would structurally declare me not to be an election official. And frankly, I find that labeling to be problematic and divisive, and it does not recognize the full breadth of experience that many of us bring to this commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Soto. Any other comments or questions from people? Going once, going twice. Ms. McLaughlin, will you call the roll? And then, again, this requires a 2/3 vote.
I will. Mary Catherine Ott,
Nay.
Michelle Woods,
Nay.
Representative Kevin Bratcher,
I'm going to abstain on this. I didn't do my homework.
Senator Daniel Ivy Soto,
Ooh.
Nay, ma'am. Nay.
Secretary Jim Condos,
Nay.
Keith Ingram,
No.
Linda Lamone,
Nay.
Ricky Hatch,
Nay.
I will vote aye. Elizabeth Howard,
Abstain.
Tim Mattice,
No.
Dean Logan,
No.
Michael Winn. I know Michael's on. I think he might be muted.
You want to abstain? I'm sorry.
Neil Kelly,
Nay.
Michael Yaki. Mr. Chairman, I think you're muted.
I am also casting 2 proxy votes for aye as well for Mark Ritchie and for David Gladney.
Marc Guthrie,
Yes.
Patrick Cannon, I know Patrick is on as well. Maybe muted. We'll skip him for the moment.
I vote yes.
Oh, there we are. Richard Pilger,
Abstain.
Chris Herren,
Abstain.
David Byrne,
No.
Philip Stark,
Aye.
Sarah Ball Johnson,
No.
Barbara Simons.
Abstain.
I'm sorry,
Abstain.
Gregory Moore,
Aye.
Larry Norden,
Abstain.
Don Gray,
No.
Jim Dixon. I think somebody had a proxy for him.
Marc Guthrie.
Yes.
And Mark Ritchie, did somebody have a proxy for him as well? Oh, that was already voted. Rick Stream,
I'm brand new, so I'm voting abstain.
Shane Scholler,
Nay.
is there anyone present to vote whose name I did not call in the roll?
Allison, Secretary Pate is on the phone.
Ah, so noted.
And he can't seem to unmute himself, but I think it's Secretary Pate. You might want to try *6. Is that how you unmute it on this forum? Anyway, he's texted me. I vote no. But I don't.
I'll defer to the chair and the election committee on the process for that, for recognizing that vote. Are there any others? Mr. Chairman?
On Mr. Pate's vote, as much as I want to, I think, first of all, I don't think it's needed, but second of all, I would not feel comfortable recognizing a text to a third party who is not a member. If he wished to, so if he can get on the line, yes, that'd be great, but I cannot recognize a vote at this point.
Chairman Yaki, I believe he just joined.
And he can vote.
Secretary Pate, are you present and do you wish to record your vote on the bylaws amendment?
I'll work with him, Allison, to see if he can get on
Great.
you. Thanks.
Thanks. I think, Mr. Chair, do you want to just proceed?
Proceed. What's the vote?
It is my, well, my tally is that I have 9 voting aye. I have 14 or 15 voting no, depending on the ruling on that vote. And I have 8 abstentions. So I do not see a 2/3 vote to pass this.
Well, in the determination of the chair, 2/3 is not, there's not a 2/3 vote attained. The bylaw amendment fails. I will now move on to recognize Sarah Ball Johnson, Chair of the Resolutions Committee.
Hello, everyone. Our Resolutions Committee, we did meet formally on the June 9th to review the 2 submissions that were submitted by the deadline. Chairman Yaki appointed myself as vice chair of the board, naturally by the bylaws, serves on that committee and is chair of that committee. Chairman Yaki appointed himself and Larry Norton as part of the resolution committee. The 3 of us did meet, like I said, on June 9th to review the 2 submissions. The first submission was the election audit, and these are my paraphrasing of small titles for big resolutions. So resolution 1 was election audit submitted by Secretary of State Jim Condos. Resolution 2 is threats to the election officials submitted by Barbara Simons. We did review those and did find that they were filed by the deadline and they were true to form. I did email those out to the membership on June 14th, along with the report from the committee. And I also emailed those again yesterday. So we have 2 resolutions before us. And if you did not receive those copies, let me know. But hopefully you got one of the 2 emails. And I'll turn it back over to Chairman Yaki.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Ball Johnson, for your good work on this. You ran the most efficient committee I've ever seen. I think we were done in like record time. So we are going to take these individually, and I'm going to recognize the proponents, the proponent of each resolution to speak for no more than 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, you have a hand raised, just as a heads up.
Ooh, okay. Sorry, the chat thing is up, so I have to close that out. Okay. Whose hand is raised?
That's this is David Byrne. I've got my hand raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Byrne, you're recognized, Mr. Byrne.
Yes, thank you. Just a point of clarification on the last vote. I'm glad we were able to get it through successfully, but was there a proxy committee established just to make sure that we're all very clear as to how is to support Allison's tally and to verify the eligibility, just because of the confusion about the chairman's comfort level in regards to the vote cast by phone?
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Rayburn to respond to this because I asked the same question. There were only 3 proxies in total that were presented to me for the commission for the board of advisors. I had appointed a proxy committee if needed to serve in that role. Mr. Rayburn, if you could answer Mr. Burns' question, that would be most appreciated.
Sure. I think proper form would be for the proxy committee to review those proxies and confirm they are valid.
Okay. I wish you told me that before the meeting, which I asked. So if I'm going to ask you to forward that information, which I sent to you, to the 3 members of the proxy committee, who also happen to be the election certification committee, to take a quick look and do that while the voting is continuing. I also want to note that for anyone who does have a proxy vote, that you have one URL to use. And if you are, or in the case of Mr. Guthrie, who is Mr. Dixon's vote, use the URL twice with the same
Mr.
password.
Yaki, all the proxies have voted and
Okay.
voted without issue. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then let's make sure that we get the proxies over to the proxy committee for them to certify before the elections are certified as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Byrne. Of course. So again, back on process, back on the resolutions here. The First Amendment is about election audits. I would like to recognize the author of that amendment, Secretary of Condos, to say a few words on its behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Yaki, Chairman Yaki. This has been a really trying year for many of the election officials around the country, and frankly, for our constituents as well, for Americans as well. The most nonpartisan election experts will tell you that this was the most secure and most, excuse me, secure election with the most integrity that we've had in decades. And yet we are still, to this day, under a constant barrage about election audits. And what we're seeing, frankly, is partisan attempts to put audits in a position to, frankly, promote the big lie. And I think what we need to do, what I think is the proper thing to do, is for the Board of Advisors to urge and recommend to the Election Assistance Commission that they issue a best practices document with regards to post-election audits. Post-election audits have a long history. Here in Vermont, we've been doing post-election audits since 2006. We've never found a discrepancy, yet we're still being attacked. This is, I think, you know, the combination between these 2 resolutions, I think, sets a good precedent for us as far as protecting election workers, but also protecting the workers that are just doing their jobs. And I think, frankly, post-election audits should promote a transparent attempt at the integrity of our election systems. I think it just speaks for itself. I wrote this in a way that was nonpartisan, with the intention of gaining support from all sides. I think, I've talked to many of my colleagues who support the idea of post-election audits. This is something that I think should be a best practice from the EAC to all states, but I think we ought to also have some criteria around those. I'll stop right there because I don't think I need to go much further. This group here understands post-election audits. I believe, and I think that we should go forward with this resolution urging the Board of the Commissioners to provide some best practices to all the states.
Thank you very much, Secretary Condos. Are there any speakers who wish to speak in favor or against this resolution? Mr. Hatch.
Thank you, Chair Yaki, and thank you, Secretary Condos, for putting this together. I agree with your sentiments on the attacks coming through these through the audit process or to the audit process. I am in favor of this conceptually. The one question, the version that I have has a repeated paragraph regarding the Civil Rights Act of 1960. And I just want to make sure that one of those two were removed if they haven't already been. And then my second comment deals with the whereas post-election audits should be transparent in process. And I'm just wondering if you'd be interested in, instead of limiting that to post-election audits, because some could say logic and accuracy testing could also be considered an audit. Just wonder if we would change that to election audits or post-election and other types of election audits. That's all I have.
I consider both to be friendly.
Is there any objection to those amendments? Looking around. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? Mr. Stark.
Again, a friendly concern. I think there's a distinction among different kinds of audits, even post-election audits, and we're seeing that play out. Arizona, New Mexico, Georgia, et cetera. New Hampshire. One sort of audit seeks to determine whether the reported outcome is correct, doing that on the basis of first establishing whether the paper trail itself is trustworthy, and then determining whether the reported result is consistent with that paper trail. What we're seeing in Arizona and proposed in Georgia is partly something else, which is an examination of things like the paper itself to determine whether or not it was legitimately cast in the first place, kind of beyond eligibility determinations and whatnot. And so I don't really have a concrete proposal to modify the wording, but I'm wondering whether there is some distinction that could be drawn. I understand, perhaps incorrectly, that the resolution as framed is really about determining whether a collection of trustworthy paper is consistent with the reported outcome, and if not, with high probability to correct the reported outcome before it's certified. I understand the resolution to address pre-certification election audits rather than post-certification election audits. And I'm just wondering whether my understanding is correct and whether perhaps we could clarify the language if so.
Secretary Condos.
So, Mr. Stark, thank you for your comments. I think to sum it up, I think this is exactly why we need the EAC Board of Commissioners or the EAC commissioners to provide us with best practices that should be put out there for everyone to use instead of having this mishmash of ways. I mean, I'm well aware of the issues. We have risk limited audits. We have other types of audits as well. For instance, here in Vermont, we randomly select a certain number of communities, and we do a top to bottom on the ballot every race for every one of those communities audit to confirm it, completely using a completely different system. So it's not even using the system that we used on election night. And there are different ways to do audits, but we have to have some guidelines as to what exactly we are all doing to make sure. And I think I don't disagree with you. I do think that some of the stuff that's going on, for instance, in Arizona, some of the stuff that was going on in my neighboring state, it was just mind-boggling to think what they were, trying to do. But that's why I think that was one of the reasons why I decided to draft this, was because I really do believe we need some best practices to put out there, high-level best practices, to ensure that we're all following the same practice in essence, and coming up with a secure and system of results that have integrity that people can count on.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak on this issue?
Mr. Chairman, this is Rick Stream from San Luis County.
Mr. Stream?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Great, thank you. I don't have any problem with the audit language in the resolution. What I would like to see, though, is the second whereas paragraph removed. I think it is a partisan statement. To me, it is, and I'd like to see that removed. The rest of it is fine.
Is that a formal amendment? Or are you asking the author if
Yes.
he's willing to?
Well, I guess
So
it is a formal amendment.
Okay, there's an amendment that has been offered to delete the second paragraph, and let me read that second paragraph to everyone. Whereas the 2020 general election is widely considered by nonpartisan experts to have been, quote, the most secure election in American history, unquote, including by the previous administration's director of the DHS's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That is the Mr. Stream, that's the paragraph you're referring to?
That's correct.
Okay. That a motion is on the floor. Is there a second for that motion?
I would second that.
Seconded by Mr. Stark. Is there any discussion on this particular motion to delete this second paragraph? Mr. Condos, would you like to speak on this issue?
Yeah, again, I think I wrote this in a way to be nonpartisan, and I really do not see how this statement is partisan. Perhaps you could enlighten me as to what makes it partisan.
Mr. Stream?
Yes. Well, I think I would dispute the fact, first of all, the nonpartisan experts. I'd like to know who nonpartisan experts are in this country anymore. And the most secure election in American history, I doubt that you'd be able to convince any of the 75 million people who voted for Donald Trump that it was the most secure in American history. To me, that in itself, and the CISA director, I don't know who that is, but there are a lot of us who feel that things in Washington, D.C. aren't the way they should be for a lot of people. I just don't have any confidence that nonpartisan experts are to be trusted, to be honest with you.
Okay. As a matter of process, there are 2 minutes left to vote. You have 2 minutes left to vote if you've not done so. Okay, Mr. Stream has made his point known. Is there any other comment on this from anyone as I stream through this?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ivy Soto.
Yes, Mr. Ivy Soto.
Thank you. I will just say that as I read that paragraph, I did not see anything partisan in the way that it was written, but I hear what some of our fellow commissioners are saying in terms of how it can be read through a different lens. And I would note that that is a whereas section, is not operative. And if we can have a resolution that we can all agree on by removing that, I think that would be a net positive. And so, while I did not find it offensive myself, I respect the perspective of my fellow commissioners and would hope that we could do so by unanimous consent. Thank you.
There will be no unanimous consent on that because I would object. Is there any other comment on this from people?
Chairman.
Mr. Scholler, and then Mr. Moore.
I would just note that there clearly is very varied opinions on this, and that as a board of advisors, we've done a good job of not weighing in on things that would be considered political, either by Congress themselves, the members of Congress, and or just the average American and how they feel. And I think that, I think Mr. Soto was correct in terms of depending upon the lens that someone reads that with, what they think it could come across in a partisan way. And I think that the issue itself, which I continue to stress here in our state, is that post-election audits and of course the logic and accuracy test. And that is what we want to keep our focus on versus becoming about one statement and removing what I think, Secretary Condos, I appreciate what you put forth. And I think that we need to continue to stress that. I've stressed that with our legislature this session, because a lot of times it seemed like they were going in a direction that really is not going to give confidence to the voters. Whereas this can give confidence to voters when they understand what we're doing. And I think we didn't accomplish that without that second whereas.
Mr. Moore? You're on mute, Mr. Moore.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the acknowledgement, Mr. Chair. I thought, I understand the points raised. First, I support the resolution wholeheartedly, and it's very necessary. And I believe it is important for our body to have a strong, united voice on this. I thought if there were amendment to the concern raised to delete the term considered by the term by nonpartisan experts. So instead it might read, whereas the 2020 general election is widely considered to have been the most secure election, including by the previous administration, et cetera. To take out the by nonpartisan experts might address the concern that was originally raised with the objection to the resolution. That's what I would proper for consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Before we decide whether or not that's going to be a formal amendment to the amendment, let me go on to the next couple of speakers. Mr. Fogarty, you had your hand raised.
I do. Thank you very much. And I wish to be heard in support of Mr. Stream's proposed amendment. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for a board of this nature, to really craft something that is just completely even-handed and cannot be misconstrued in an uneven manner. So I think that we do ourselves a service to get to the result that we want, and it's a very great concept, Mr. Kondo. But I think we would serve ourselves by supporting Mr. Stream's proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, I couldn't let this discussion go without making a statement because I did have this conversation with a couple of members of the resolutions committee. I hope that the fact that this discussion is even occurring can be a cautionary note for all of us that in the future we might want to dispense with whereas clauses. I think that it's really unfortunate that the thrust of this amendment is getting caught up in a discussion about clauses that are really not central to the statement itself. And so while I will support a motion to strike this language because it is controversial, and I do not believe that this resolution ought to be controversial, I hope that we'll be able to do that either by reaching an understanding of maybe a shift in the language for that clause, or, if we have to strike it, whatever we need to do to try to get to not needing to take recorded votes on such matters.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stream, Mr. Moore wanted to know whether or not if by removing the phrase nonpartisan, if that would be satisfy or does that you still want the entire paragraph struck even with those words taken out?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Mr. Moore's attempt there. It's good faith attempt. I still believe that the entire whereas clause is a partisan clause, and I would ask that my amendment stand as it was submitted originally.
Okay. Mr. Condos, do you have any response? Any last word? You unmute yourself, Mr. Condos. Secretary Condos, you're muted.
There we go.
The perils of Zoom.
Yes, for 15 months. So this resolution, I think, is really an important statement for this body to make. Having said that, I hate to see this potentially be something that would stop this resolution from moving forward. I will say that the director of DHS's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency was Chris Krebs, that we all worked with, all 50 states, the 7 territories. We all worked with Chris Krebs and CISA since 2016. He was the one that specifically made that comment, but there were other nonpartisan organizations. Having said that, though, I am willing to cut this thing loose, this paragraph. I really feel strongly that there's nothing wrong with this, that there was nothing partisan about this. In drafting this resolution, I really was focused on trying to keep this as nonpartisan as possible. I think it's too bad that we've gotten to the point where the comments to remove it have become partisan, and really this is not the intent of this motion or this resolution. So I'm willing to take that second bullet out. I'm sorry that it has to, but the rest of this is important.
Thank you very much. So with the author doing that, will you withdraw your amendment, Mr. Stream?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Before I'm going to ask Ms. McLaughlin to call the roll on this if there are no more speakers on this. Before that occurs, though, I'm going to exercise my privilege as chair to say a few comments on this. I do support this motion. I support this resolution. I supported it as written. Quite frankly, I'm a little disturbed that we would find that second paragraph to be controversial in the least. As was pointed out by Secretary Condos, this was a statement that was made by Mr. Krebs with the previous administration's Department of Homeland Security. In addition, there are any number of individuals and secretaries of state, some of whom are here today, who have made the same claim with regard to how their state elections were run at a time when there are still people out there who question the legitimacy of this past election. And I'm extremely disappointed that we would give in to that skepticism, that we would give in to that concern for the sake of having a quote unquote clean resolution. We are a democracy. We can argue, we can fight, and we can decide that maybe if you don't like something, you don't have to vote for it. But I think that taking this out, especially in the manner in which we have done so, gives encouragement to those who continue the big lie from last election, that somehow, for some reason, it wasn't legitimate. And we all know it was. We all know it is. We all know that the thrust of Mr. Secretary Condos' amendments are to deal with some of the continued attempts, even now, to delegitimize that election. Notwithstanding how many millions of people voted for one person or another, and that one person got more, one person got more in the state in order to get the electoral college requirement that they needed. And no one has seriously challenged that. With that being said, Ms. McLaughlin, will you call the roll?
Mary Catherine Ott,
Abstain.
Michelle Woods,
Abstain.
Representative Kevin Bratcher,
Point of order, what's the yes and no here?
yes, Mr. Chair.
The resolution as amended, in which the second paragraph has been removed, is on the floor. So it's the amended resolution where the second paragraph has been stricken. A yes vote is a vote in favor of the resolution as amended. A no vote is a no vote.
Mr. Chair, am I correct that there was also a friendly amendment? Wasn't the post-election struck so that it was just audits generally?
Did Mr. Condos accept that? I think he did.
It was the part about the Civil Rights Act being mentioned twice.
Oh, that's right.
There was no decision on the suggestion from Member Hatch on changing post-election audit to election audits or not. There was an agreement, of course, on striking the duplicative paragraph.
Okay. Understood.
Mr. Hatch, did you want to put that as a formal amendment?
Yeah. Let's change post-election to election audits.
Is there a second for that?
This is Keith Ingram. I'd second it.
Seconded.
Can I just ask a quick question? Ricky, is that the fourth whereas where it says paper ballots and post-election audits?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the sixth one. Whereas, post-election audits should be transparent.
Okay.
Is that the only occurrence?
Well, there's further occurrences, but he's referring to the sixth. Secretary Condos, does that change your mind on whether to accept it as friendly or not?
I would accept that as friendly.
Okay. Then Mr. Hatch, will you withdraw your amendment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That being so as amended with that sixth post-election audit replaced by election audit with the second paragraph being struck, we will restart the roll call to make sure
Mary Catherine Ott,
on the same page.
Abstain.
Michelle Woods,
Abstain.
Representative Kevin Bratcher,
I know I'm the newbie. I still not clear what we're voting for. I vote yes to remove the entire that entire paragraph.
I know we've already, Mr. Bratcher, we have already struck by agreement the second paragraph. So that's gone. Mr. Hatch's amendment was accepted. So we are voting now on the entire resolution as amended with the second paragraph struck and with the duplicate paragraph, which I think was only in yours, not in the last one, about the Civil Rights Act not being there. And Mr. Hatch's replacement of the word post-election with election in the sixth whereas clause. So you're voting on the resolution as amended. This will be the only vote on this item. It's up or down at this point. So with that being said, what is your vote?
I'll vote yes then.
Thank you.
Senator Daniel Ivey Soto,
Yes, ma'am.
Secretary Jim Condos,
Yes.
Secretary Paul Pate,
Yes.
Keith Ingram,
Yes.
Linda Lamone,
Yes.
Ricky Hatch.
Yes.
I vote yes. Elizabeth Howard,
Yes.
Tim Mattice,
Yes.
Dean Logan,
Yes.
Michael Winn,
Aye.
Neil Kelly,
Yes.
Michael Yaki.
Aye, and I cast my two proxies in favor as well.
So recorded. Marc Guthrie,
I vote yes, and I cast my proxy for Jim Dixon in the affirmative.
Patrick Cannon,
I'm voting yes, although I do support the paragraph that was removed. But this is a yes vote.
Richard Pilger,
Abstain.
Chris Herren,
Abstain.
David Byrne,
Abstain.
Philip Stark,
Aye.
Sarah Ball Johnson,
Aye.
Barbara Simons,
Yes.
Greg Moore,
Yes.
Larry Norden,
Yes.
Don Gray,
Yes.
Jim Dixon. Oh, we have his proxy was already recorded. Rick Stream,
Yes.
Shane Scholler,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have 27 votes yes, and I have 5 abstentions. I do not have any nays recorded.
Thank you very much. The resolution passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Condos, for your efforts on this. We'll move now to the second resolution.
Here.
I
Excuse me. I have
Yes.
sent an email to the elections committee. I would like for them to check their emails and to confirm the results that I have sent them at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barton. Again, we're going to the next resolution. Barbara Simons, I believe you were the proponent of this. If you would have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Fogarty has his hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Chairman Yaki. John Fogarty, I joined late, and if you could kindly add me to the roll, and if you could kindly record me as a yay on the prior question. Thank you very much.
Sure, without objection, so noted.
Got it.
Ms. Simons, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Yaki. So I submitted this resolution about the harassment and threats of election officials because, like I'm sure all of you, I was appalled to hear that election officials, some actually had to go into hiding because of the threats, and others had to have protection provided by the state because of the threats. I didn't prepare any remarks because I think the resolution speaks for itself. I hope it does. And of course, I hope that everyone will vote yes. So that's what I have to say. I should just add, election officials are the foundation of our democracy, and we really need to speak out in support of them. I think it's very important. And I personally want to thank the election officials who are here. You guys are doing a great job. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any speakers for or against this? Well, first of all, Ms. Simons, are you moving this resolution
Of course.
for approval?
Yes, I am.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Stark. Is there any discussion on this item? And I'm having to look down. Mr. Moore, I'm recognizing you, then Mr. Stark.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
Just real quickly, just want to acknowledge the work that was done this year to improve poll worker recruitment. And it was actually the EAC, as well as a number of election officials and groups around the country, who did a great job of increasing that number of people who were available to help out with the election. That being said, I think the resolution speaks to that, and that recruitment drive was unprecedented. So this resolution helps ensure that those recruitment efforts can continue, and that the threats that are out there now would not be a deterrent against anybody who wouldn't want to help support our election officials in their work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stark?
So I know that election officials who are members of our board of advisors have received threats. I have also received threats as a result of my participation in the audit in New Hampshire. It's extremely uncomfortable, and I strongly support this motion.
Any other comments from the floor? Seeing
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary Condos.
Yeah, I want to just state that, I'm an elected official. I'm the chief elections official, and I'm a big boy, and I can handle a lot of this. I shouldn't have to, but what my staff had to endure, almost immediately after the election was over, was unconscionable. We received text messages, we received voicemails. They were vulgar, they were threatening. We turned them over to the state police, to the Department of Justice, to the FBI, to our state's attorneys, our attorney general. These things are hard to track down, and it was, my own family was negatively impacted by this. We didn't end up, and this is in a state that's considered a blue state. I mean, let's be real here. The votes were what you see every year. But to have people say to you, there's a reason why the firing squads are coming back and you're next on the list. When they talk about you being sent to prison for the big lie, our big lie, supposedly. This was horrible. The staff of our team should not have had to put up with this. And frankly, it was appalling. And I think that hopefully this will send a nice message out to folks that we hear them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary Condos. Any other comments? Seeing none, will you please call the roll? Or actually, I'm going to try and short circuit this. If there are any objections to this resolution, would you please register it by unmuting yourself and saying so or raising your hand? In the opinion of the chair, there are no objections. Without objection, this resolution is adopted. Thank you very much, Ms. Simons. Okay, we are I'm going to ask Ms. Harrington, the Executive Director, to give a quick update, and then we're going to have a break for the proxy committee and the election certification committee, one and the same, to do a quick huddle offline and report the proxy certification and the election results. So you can time your whatever you want to call it accordingly, but we'll have a 5-minute break after the presentation by Ms. Harrington. So Executive Director Harrington, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Yaki. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here with you today. For those of you who may not be familiar with me, I'm the Executive Director, Mona Harrington. It's good to see you all on camera, and hopefully next year we can meet in person. So to begin, the EAC leadership and the staff want to recognize all of your contributions, especially those of you who are election members of this board and all the election officials across the country. I wanted to highlight our new seal that we adopted earlier this year that I'm certain you've seen in our PowerPoint and in our other materials. We thought it was important that our official seal reflected the enhancement of our core mission responsibilities. The seal that you're looking at on the screen reflects the EAC's testing and certification of voting machines by showing the circuit board. The circuit board diodes incorporate the word vote in Braille, reflecting the importance of accessibility for voters with disabilities, and EAC's role in ensuring all Americans can vote privately and independently. The flag reflects democracy. The EAC is a federal agency and voters' rights. The stars represent the mission critical functions of the EAC, and the ballot box reflects the various options of voting. On this slide, I'm showing some accomplishments from 2020. 2020 was also a challenging year for the EAC staff, and I wanted to highlight some of the agency's accomplishments. The entirety of our efforts can be found in a lot of detail in the EAC 2020 annual report on our website. But some of the highlights of today include the $400 million in CARES for states to prepare for and respond to the coronavirus for 2020 federal elections, distribution of $425 million in new HAVA security grants funding, the VVSG 2.0 that was approved unanimously by our commissioners on February 10th. Throughout 2020, we held hearings and reviewed public comments while developing final versions. Thank you to the board members and our federal partners at NIST who are part of that process. We also launched our first National Poll Worker Recruitment Day campaign to assist in a national effort to recruit poll workers amidst the pandemic. We tried to address the critical shortage of poll workers identified by election officials during the primaries. And we had election officials from at least 37 states, corporations, celebrities, elected officials, nonprofits, and more from across the country that joined the effort. We launched a new CAS program, the Cyber Access and Security Program, that assisted states with cyber resources and training, which included webinars and white papers on risk mitigation and offered 3 levels of cyber training free of charge to the states. We relocated our office space to Washington, D.C. We chaired the GCC-SCC Joint COVID Working Group that produced numerous COVID-19 resources, along with our federal partners, DHS, CISA, CDC, FBI, and others. Documents were published on topics related to mail absentee voting, in-person voting, and other safety, accessibility, and security topics related to responding to the pandemic. We also co-authored election-related CDC guidelines for in-person voting and produced a video in coordination with the DC Board of Elections. We hosted 38 events, including 2 all-day in-person events and 36 virtual hearings, roundtable discussions, webinars, and interviews. We also commissioned Rutgers to perform a 2020 disability and voting accessibility study, and that report can be found on our website. And last but certainly not least, on accomplishments of 2020, we had about 10,000 press mentions that assisted with combating misinformation. This slide goes over some of our anticipated accomplishments of 2021. Some of the things that we have in progress right now or have accomplished this year include the following. The EAC established a new clearinghouse department consisting of 5 election subject matter experts. In the last couple of months, several local election officials from across the country and a dedicated accessibility SME have joined the EAC staff. The subject matter expert is focused solely on accessibility and will ensure that accessibility permeates the culture of the EAC and informs all of the products that we provide. Collectively, the SMEs that we have hired have over 40 years of election experience. Some of the work product that is currently in progress by the SMEs includes a review of EVE's data for quality, an election terms glossary, establishment of state-specific pages in coordination with NCSL, a one-stop shop for election information, election FAQs, training videos, voter education and other election materials, template libraries, best practices, lessons learned from the 2020 report, in coordination with MIT, that includes both Charles Stewart and John Fortier, audit best practices, and chain of custody guidance, which we're reviewing and hope to release very soon. As of June 8th, the EAC is very excited to announce to all of you the establishment of a new FACA, the Local Leadership Council. This will allow for a critical feedback loop with locals, allowing the EAC to better serve its stakeholders with election officials. The EAC will appoint 100 members, 2 from each state, after soliciting nominations from each state's election official professional association. Also, we expect to release the EVES 2020 this year in August. That will allow the EAC time to review the data for quality, There were some delays this year with data being submitted late due to the pandemic and other factors. We're also looking forward to seeing the Section A working group as a subcommittee of the Standards Board to be reinstated in order to identify areas that need improvement in the EVE survey. We're working on implementing a pilot e-pollbook program focused on security and accessibility. And our Office of Inspector Generals identified the following states will be audited this year. They include Arizona, California, Delaware, Indiana, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Washington. The EAC grant staff and management are available to support these states throughout the audit and are available to assist with any of your needs. So here's an update on VVSG 2.0 and next steps on this chart. I hope you can see. It's also on our website if you cannot. The next steps, there are 4 main steps, and you can break those down to the required NAVLAP preparedness tasks, establishing an end-to-end encryption program, adopting a VVSG lifecycle policy, and lab accreditation to include the NAVLAP and EAC accreditation. Here I'd like to go into some detail on the NAVLAP process. The NIST NAVLAP program utilizes a handbook titled NIST Handbook 150-22 for technical requirements and guidance for the accreditation of laboratories under the National Voluntary Laboratory Accreditation Program. And this work is happening concurrently with other VVSG 2.0 tasks mentioned here with a scheduled completion date in late 2021. One of the important items in determining the competencies required by the laboratory personnel in order to meet the upgraded VVSG 2.0 requirements. So items that might be included as new competencies include evaluating data schemas for conformance with interoperability, conducting pen testing, evaluating end-to-end cryptographically verifiable systems for correct protocol implementations. And in addition to the handbook, NAVLAP assessors also utilize checklists containing the technical requirements that VISTLs will be assessed against. These also require updating based on the new VVSG requirements. Other additions to the NAVLAP program include assessing test methods utilized by the VISTLs for traceability to test assertions and updated requirements. Not all the requirements contain test assertions. Finally, NIST will work with the EAC to create materials to help the VISTLs prepare for accreditation under 2.0. On the end-to-end verifiable protocol evaluation, I think you all are probably aware that there are a very limited number of experts in the type of encryption required of E2E verifiable voting systems under the VVSG 2.0. Accordingly, evaluating these protocols requires the EAC to engage with external partners to create the evaluation program mandated in VVSG 2.0 requirements. And this work is happening concurrently with other updates mentioned here and is scheduled to be completed by fall of 2021. The EAC is currently working with partners to develop the evaluation criteria and methodologies required. In addition to the other work we're doing to move the VVSG 2.0 along, we're working on a life cycle policy that is expected to be in draft format by late fall 2021. Today, we're interested in receiving feedback from all of you on this board on the draft 0 policy that you should have received in one of the documents transmitted to you in advance of this meeting. In the coming months, we'd also like to engage other stakeholders on the Board of Advisors, the TGDC, as well as the VISTLs, voting system manufacturers, and the experts at NIST. Jessica Bowers, our Chief Information and Security Officer, will go over this in more detail, or John Panic, our Testing and Cert Director, may be doing that. I'm not certain which one. The VISTL accreditation, the last part of the process is VISTL accreditation. And so following the update of the NIST NAVLAP materials for 2.0, both NIST and the EAC will be prepared to accredit VISTLs to VVSG 2.0. This will be an interim accreditation to add 2.0 to their existing accreditation, and whether or not to apply for accreditation is a business decision for each VISTL. So far, they've indicated a willingness to apply when the program is able to accredit, but the reality is that they may need to conduct additional training, adjust their test methods and other program elements, or even hire specialized personnel in order to obtain accreditation. And the EAC is ready to help ease the process with the VISTLs by sharing information with them on a regular basis as we move through the updates to NAVLAB manual and the checklists, or make changes to how the EAC will conduct accreditation assessments. On the e-poll book initiative and the evaluation pilot, which is one of our 2021 priorities, I just want to go over briefly what that looks like. The EAC will create this program manual that will describe key elements such as the requirements and responsibilities for participants in the program, including manufacturer registration, a quality monitoring program, and testing and reporting procedures. Requirements will be developed and published similar to the VVSG, but with a much narrower scope. They'll focus on unique aspects of e-poll books related to security, usability, and accessibility. The testing will be conducted by EAC accredited VISTLs. Test plans, reports, and relevant attachments will be posted on the EAC website and will include typical system configuration information like software versions, hardware used, and hashes. It will be voluntary, and manufacturer participation is necessary for it to be successful. It must be agile. We don't want to cause too much additional overhead in terms of time or cost. Currently, the labs take approximately 1 to 2 months to evaluate. We believe this turnaround can be shortened through standardization. We also want to support the ability for our manufacturers to rapidly iterate and have their systems evaluated. The standard will clearly need to be kept up to date depending on how specific the requirements are. The standard may need to be updated frequently. This could be yearly or less. As we make progress on this very important project, we will be certain to solicit your feedback and provide updates. A little bit on funding and staffing at the EAC. This chart shows you the increase, and the increase at the EAC as far as the budget goes has allowed for significant enhancements and accomplishments at the EAC. We stretched the funding a long way and have significantly improved mission critical activities required of the agency. This slide shows you the funding from 2010 to anticipated funding perhaps in 2022. Interesting note on this slide is when taking into account the present value of EAC appropriations in 2010, the 2022 president's budget will bring the agency to an operating ability it had 12 years ago. That said, we believe we've exercised our fiduciary responsibilities diligently. As previously mentioned, we expanded our team in many mission critical areas. We hired a new testing and cert director, John Panic, and hired other members to fulfill critical positions that include cybersecurity talent, as well as the SMEs I mentioned earlier. A little bit on HAVA and CARES grants. You can see on the screen the numbers. I'll just give you a little bit of information on what states have expended. So as of March 31st, 2021, states have expended 51% of the roughly 805 million awarded. That's up 21% from last year. And the states are using the HAVA security grant funds to upgrade voting equipment, increase voter registration and system security upgrades, implement multi-factor authentication for system access, conduct post-election audits, increase cybersecurity, and conduct training on cybersecurity processes. Here's a chart that shows you election security expenditures by category. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The other category are expenditures that include ADA compliance, administrative and indirect costs, pandemic-related supplies, and physical security. Some states had to reallocate election security expenditures to CARES during the reporting period. little more on the CARES grants. The EAC expects to close all CARES grants by spring 2022. And as of June 2021, 8 states have officially closed their grants, and 25 states will submit final reports by June 29, 2021. The remaining 23 states are expected to submit final reports by December 31st, 21. Here's a chart of expenditures by category. That consisted of personal protective equipment, temporary staff to manage much higher volume of absentee mail ballots, communication to inform voters of changes in processes, printing mail-in ballots and envelopes, postage, processing equipment and ballot drop boxes, and expansion of polling locations. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. If you have questions, I'm open to taking those at this time.
Are there any questions from the members?
Mr. Chairman, it's Linda Lamone here.
Ms. Lamone?
Good afternoon. Mona, I have a couple of questions. With regard to the VVSG 1.0 sunsetting, what process are you all going to use to do that? And will the boards or the TGDC be involved?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It'll follow the same process as the other policy documents of the VVSG. We definitely are soliciting feedback today. We did as well in the standards board. We'll be posting it. We are very much looking for feedback and comment on it so we can get it to a point where we feel it's ready to work for everyone. It seems like it's a complicated effort and requires a lot of feedback because it affects all election officials depending on their circumstances, and we really recognize that, and we don't want to rush that, but we're certainly looking to get feedback and to understand how we can enhance that, especially starting with our boards.
Yeah, because as you said, it's going to impact a lot of jurisdictions, and it's important that the election officials have an opportunity to weigh in and an ample opportunity to implement it. The same questions with regard to the electronic poll book certification evaluation program. Are election officials and the boards or the TGDC going to be involved in that?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking to be very transparent and use you as our stakeholders to help us evaluate that pilot and get feedback from all of you and all of our boards so that we can make that product work for you. So absolutely looking for that feedback and looking to have a transparent process and a product in the end that proves valuable.
Yeah, that's great. Because again, a lot of us are either just purchased or going to be purchasing new poll books, and the after the fact certification or evaluation could be problematic to us. So we really do need to be involved, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other comments or questions from the members? Seeing none, I promised you a 5-minute break. We're going to have a 5-minute break starting now. We'll come back at 2:47 p.m. So 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. We're coming back to order in a minute. Is Commissioner Hicks here? I thought I saw him.
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Hicks, thank you for joining us. All your other colleagues who've been here have been able to have said a few words. Would you like to say a few words as our former and dear longtime DFO for the Board of Advisors?
Well, I appreciate that. I'm sorry I was a little late. My flight got in not as on time as I had wanted it to be. So I showed up a little bit late, but I want to thank everyone for their service to the board. Your views are taken seriously. And even though things are not accepted in terms of formally, all 4 commissioners are here today listening to that. So I think that it shows a lot of the commitment that folks are doing this. I appreciate all of you. And I hope that we can meet in person because as the EAC has grown, there's a number of folks that I've never met in person who work at the agency. So it would be nice to meet the new members of the board. And I want to thank all the election officials who tirelessly went out and conducted an election in 2020. Want to thank all the other stakeholders who were advocates for making sure democracy remains strong and pointing out issues when they occurred and so forth. So I want to thank you all and thank you, Chairman Yaki, for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And also I realized that the former chair and still current commissioner, Ben Hovland, who successfully shepherded the EAC through the 2020 election is here, and I want to give him the opportunity to say a few words. Commissioner Hovland.
Thanks, Chairman Yaki. I know there's a long agenda and everyone's said it so well, so I'll just echo those sentiments and thank you all for serving on this board. It really does matter. We had the standards board meeting last week. We value this input. We need to hear from our stakeholders. The agency is doing a number of exciting things. We are growing, as Vice Chair Hicks alluded to. We're working on a new program, and we want to make sure, as Executive Director Harrington alluded to earlier, while we have more resources than they did, they're still limited. So we want to use them as effectively as possible. And so much of that is dependent on hearing from you, from the standards board, on the ways that we can be most effective in supporting the election community. So thank you all for taking time to do this today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Barbara Simons, are you ready to give the report of the proxy certification committee?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was the one to give the report.
Wait, yes, I designated you as the chair if you read your emails.
Yes, Barb is the proxy for the chair for the proxy. Shane is the chair for the election certification.
I see, so I'm chair for the proxy.
Yes.
So I haven't,
I have that information here if you need it, Barbara.
yeah, why don't you report it? Because I didn't realize I was
Scholler.
going to be on the spot to speak
Okay.
right now. So I hadn't prepared it. I apologize.
That's okay. Mr. Scholler, I field promote you to give the report of the proxy certification committee.
Absolutely. And on behalf of the Election Certification Committee, I'm here to announce the results of the election. And first, I do want to make sure everyone knows that Chairman Yaki had 2 proxy votes on behalf of David Cladney and Mark Ritchie. And then Mr. Marc Guthrie has 1 proxy vote for Jim Dickinson. And the results of the election for chair are a 14-14 tie between Mr. Keith Ingram and Allison McLaughlin. And I will get to the details of that after I announce the next 2 results. For vice chair, a total of 28 votes were cast for Mr. Greg Moore. And for secretary, a total of 28 votes cast for Mr. Ricky Hatch. The bylaws call for an automatic recount of the votes cast for the tied candidates. Now, since this election has taken place over the internet, we don't have physical ballots to recount. We only have the original ballots that were cast. And of course, those were thoroughly went through by the individual at the EAC who was doing that. So if a tie remains following a recount, we as the board shall conduct a runoff for election between the top 2 vote getters. I do want to let everyone know that if we have a tie after this runoff election, that the Election Certification Committee at that point is going to resolve the tie with the toss of a coin. And so I just encourage everyone to cast your vote in this runoff election. And I believe, Mr. Chairman, that would call for an amendment of the agenda for us to be able to have this runoff election.
True. First, I'm going to ask Ms. Barton, what would be the proceed? Has there been because we did electronic votes and we are unable to do a recount, but has there been at least a recount of the electronically tabulated votes before we move on to the next step?
Yes, that's correct. We have an individual on staff who was able to see each email that submitted their ballot. And so we have gone through all of that to make sure every person that wanted to vote was able to vote. Those have all been counted. We have verified the numbers. We are prepared. We were prepared just in case this happened. And we do have a second link prepared to go out for all of you to vote again.
Well, in the best tradition of American democracy, vote early and often. Is there a motion to amend the agenda to allow a runoff vote for chair?
This is Sarah Johnson. I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Barbara Simons. Is there any objection? Seeing none, I would ask the staff to send out the links for the vote. Let us give 15 minutes for this vote, or what would be the appropriate time?
So also, Chair, just to let you know, the link will be coming out. The password that you used the first time will be the password that you use this time also. Okay. New link, but same.
And how much time should we allow for this vote? Is there any objection to 15 minutes from anyone? Seeing none.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have my hand up if I could.
Yes, Mr. Byrne.
Thank you. I would just like to request that we hear from the candidates themselves as opposed to beating our head against a wall for top 2 candidates who have already gone in once and you're asking us to vote again. I think it would be prudent for us to hear directly from the candidates, especially given the new Board of Advisors.
Is there any objection
this might be the
to?
first time they've heard from either.
Thank you.
But I just, before we do that, Michael, I just wanted to, or Chairman Yaki, I wanted to add something to the report. We were asked to check the results, to validate the results. And as Shane said, we couldn't because it was a secret ballot using internet voting and there was no way to validate the results.
I understand. It's why we don't like that in the real world. So is there any objection to having 2 to 3 minute candidate statements from each candidate? See none. Let's see. Do I have a coin? I have a coin somewhere. Who has a coin? Mr. Scholler, you must have a coin.
You have a coin if necessary.
Okay. Heads is Ms. McLaughlin. Tails is Mr. Ingram. To see who goes first. Oh, wait.
I gotta go get the coin. Hang on.
Well, that'll give them both a little more time to prepare. I know who has real money anymore. Can I Venmo myself a coin?
All right.
Okay, so heads, Ms. McLaughlin. Tails, Mr. Ingram to go first.
All right. Let me see it here. Tails.
Mr. Ingram, the floor is yours. You have 2 to 3 minutes.
That in the current federal guidelines. I don't think there ever will be.
Thank you.
That's an inherent security.
My name is Keith Ingram. I'm the director of the Elections Division in Texas, and I am proud to have this opportunity to address you guys. I have been involved in the elections community for 9.5 years as the elections director here in Texas, and during that time, I have been very passionate about and involved in every aspect of the voluntary voting system guideline development from the time when there weren't any EAC commissioners until the present time. I don't know if any of you were involved in the working groups that NIST put together for different aspects of the requirements, but I was involved in the interoperability and cybersecurity working groups, and there weren't very many election officials in those groups, and it, I think, shows in the requirements that have been developed. And unfortunately, this group, this body, did not get to vote on those requirements. The question was never called. We discussed them, we talked about it, but we never actually voted on those requirements. And so I think it's important for this group to keep the main thing. And for us, I think the voluntary voting system guidelines are the main thing, and we need to keep that central. I think it's very important that we advise the EAC on other issues. Secretary Condos's recommendation that the EAC take the lead on post-election audits, I think, is a very good, very necessary step. But I also think that we need to make sure that we keep the main thing, and that's the reason why I allowed myself to be nominated for this position. I would very much appreciate your vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ingram. Ms. McLaughlin.
Allison McLaughlin. I'm the Deputy Election Director in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I think Keith and I are both servants of the board here. And I know either one of us will serve at the pleasure of the board. In my case, I was tapped on the shoulder a few years ago and asked to run for secretary because we needed someone to step forward. And so now I have served in the last 2 terms on the executive committee of the board. And if you do select me to be the chair, then I will be the holdover. I will be the one who is providing continuity in the executive committee. I will say that in my last year or 2 on this board, I've gained some insight. I knew from the beginning that this was a very different body than the standards board. We have a very different membership, and we are charged to advise. And I believe that it is our duty to listen, but also upon listening and reflecting, to provide the EAC with our advice, both to seek from the EAC and from its staff what input they need from us, and to provide the opportunity for the members who've been appointed to this body under HAVA to have the opportunity to have the mic and to speak at our meetings, to provide the expertise that I know all of you have. And so my focus, if you choose to select me as your chair, will be on structuring that conversation in such a way where each one of you will be asked what you want to bring to your role on the Board of Advisors and how you would like to see the agenda for our meetings structured. And we will endeavor to make sure that we are focusing our agendas around those areas where the EAC and its staff most need our input and advice.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you, for putting your names forward. It's always a fun thing to do, and we'll return to our regular agenda while the vote continues. Ms. Barton, how much time is left in the vote?
We have about 10 minutes left.
10 minutes left. Okie doke. Check your inboxes, everyone. Okay, we are going to go back to our regularly scheduled programming and have a discussion of the wild and wonderful VVSG 2.0 and its aftermath with John Panic, our own EAC testing and certification director. Mr. Panic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Yaki. Just a second here, everybody. Okay, can you see that all right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good afternoon to all of you on the Board of Advisors. My name is John Panic, and I'm the new Testing and Certification Director with the EAC. And it's my pleasure to be here with you today and to be presenting these topics. Items I'm going to discuss today are the BVSG program manual enhancements, which include major updates in the manual version 3.0, as well as recent changes being made for the version 3.1 draft that are coming soon. And also an overview of the BVSG lifecycle policy, which Mona has discussed previously, and we're currently drafting at this time. For this topic, I'm going to provide a few options and some of the different slides regarding some of the specific details under consideration for the policy that hopefully will generate some conversation and feedback. So for you guys, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to chime in at that time. Okay, so my first topic is the enhancements to the Testing and Certification Manual 3.0. Major enhancements to the Testing and Certification Manual version 3.0 posted on the EAC website are the component testing pilot program in Appendix F and the penetration testing as part of the test readiness review in Section 4.5. The component testing pilot program is being introduced to assess the feasibility of integrating a discrete VVSG 2.0 compliant component into a system outside the context of a full system certification. The intent is to incorporate 2.0 certified components into an existing EAC certified voting system, as well as to allow modifications to singular components of a system, which should decrease the overhead of baseline system modifications. The penetration testing is described in the manual section 4.5. This effort includes two phases. Phase one is the pre-testing assessment, which includes a vulnerability and threat analysis report to be submitted by the VISTL to the EAC for review. Phase two is the actual penetration test, which may commence when the phase one assessment report is approved by the EAC. The prerequisites section 4.5.5 describes that the voting system must be configured for the pen test exactly how it is documented by the manufacturer and how it is to be used in elections. This process is intended to effectively mitigate the number of security vulnerabilities in voting systems, as it will force them to be addressed at the front end of all EAC test campaigns. An attestation by the manufacturer that all critical vulnerabilities have been addressed must be submitted with a final certification testing report and will be published on the EAC's website. There are some additional changes to the Testing and Certification Manual version 3.0 coming soon. A version 3.1 draft with red lines has been prepared or is currently being prepared and will be published on the EAC website soon that contains significant changes discussed in the next few slides. Manufacturers are now required to disclose any essential patent claims to the EAC that would be infringed upon by the use, sale, offer for sale, or the other disposition of a voting system compliant with the most recently adopted version of the VVSG or a proposed version of the VVSG published in the Federal Register for adoption. This new section also requires current essential patent claims to be disclosed to the EAC by the end of 2021. The ownership interest disclosure has been updated. Requirements to disclose have been reduced from 51 to 25% ownership. Interest, as well as both direct and indirect ownership, is now specified. This is in line with banking disclosure requirements. The manufacturer definition and registration process now requires submission for certification within 24 months of application approval. This is to prevent entities that have no intention of producing a legitimate voting system from registering with the EAC. Over the years, RFIs and NOCs have been released to clarify some aspects of either the VVSG requirements or the program manuals. These have not always been added into subsequent versions of the manuals. So all RFIs and NOCs that are applicable to the manuals and have not already been incorporated into the current version will be added. Significant additions to manufacturer agreements have been made. These are generally to ensure the EAC has situational knowledge of various critical aspects of voting system testing outside the EAC program or while in use. Manufacturers are required to provide their supply chain risk management strategy and information regarding all types of security testing that voting system equipment is subject to outside of the EAC testing and certification program. Registered manufacturers must cooperate with EAC inquiries, requests for information, and requests to attend official hearings and meetings. Manufacturers must report all fielded voting systems, not just EAC certified. The currently published manual only requires EAC certified voting systems be reported. Manufacturers must participate in voting system or other election system monitoring programs established by the EAC during elections, including early voting or on election day as applicable. And finally, registered manufacturers shall not convey or imply that their status as a registered manufacturer with the EAC constitutes an EAC endorsement of the manufacturer or its products, or an EAC certification of that manufacturer's products. The next topic I'm going to talk about is to get into a little more detail on the VVSG lifecycle policy. The EAC is currently drafting a VVSG lifecycle policy with a targeted release of the fall of 2021. And this is to coincide with the implementation of VVSG 2.0. The intent of this policy is to help facilitate migration to the new VVSG 2 standard by providing guidance on deprecation of the obsolete standards, establishing a periodic review and update timeline for new standards going forward, and versioning of future standards. These proposed changes have the potential to significantly impact the usage of the VVSG and EAC certified voting systems. So with that, your feedback is critical to ensuring the policy is robust and serves its purpose while simultaneously minimizing any negative impacts. The EAC is committed to doing everything we can to make the transition to the new VVSG as smooth as possible. The following core aspects of the VVSG lifecycle policy are being presented to generate some discussion and solicit feedback on some of the potential methods of implementation for each area. Reducing or eliminating the certification of voting systems to obsolete standards, i.e. VVSG 1 and 1.0 and 1.1, is a key element to the transition to 2.0. Currently, manufacturers may certify modifications to existing 1.0 certified systems without significant bounds around what constitutes a modification versus a new system. Manufacturers submitting new systems must submit to the most recently implemented VVSG version, which is currently VVSG 1.1, and no system has been certified to that standard yet. It's critical to move adoption of VVSG 2.0 forward. while not stranding users of 1.0 certified systems from not being able to receive critical updates. For the purposes of this conversation, deprecation means that systems can no longer be submitted for testing against the standard. The EAC does not propose decertifying systems tested and certified to obsolete standards at this time. The EAC proposes the following options for the deprecation discussion. One is to allow modifications to currently certified systems indefinitely with a narrow definition of what is allowed as a modification. The proposed narrowing would exclude the addition of new system components and resemble the current de minimis change process, but allow for additional testing. Number two is to allow modifications to currently certified systems indefinitely with no changes to the definition of a modification. This could include a requirement added to the testing and certification program manual that would prevent manufacturers from marketing VVSG 1.0 systems as EAC certified to new customers 24 months after implementation of VVSG 2.0. We proposed the meaning of a new customer being analogous to new implementation, but may need some calibration to account for state certification and other statewide implementations that may be in progress. Number three, implement deprecation of an obsolete standard approximately 12 months after certification of the first voting system to VVSG2. Modifications to voting systems certified under the obsolete standard would not be allowed, only de minimis changes could be applied. And number four, implement deprecation of obsolete standards approximately 24 months after at least one VSTL is accredited to test against VVSG 2.0. Mods to voting systems could be certified under the obsolete standards. Modifications to voting systems certified under the obsolete standards would not be allowed. Only de minimis changes could be applied. So with that, I want to see if anybody has any feedback or any questions on the options that are presented here for the deprecation.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for John? Please mute yourself because I don't have control of the screen, so I can't see any raised hands right now.
Yes, Mr. Byrne.
David?
Hi, just a quick question. So have you heard from, not so much on the deprecation side, but I'm curious about test plan impacts from VSTLs up to this point in terms of VVSG 2.0? Any impacts from them in terms of the test plan, overall execution, any increase in the time? And then also increase to the cost, because that cost gets carried over to the industry. And then second part of that is any feedback from the industry in terms of concerns expressed about this deprecation and kind of sunsetting and setting the stage for this migration to VVSG 2.0.
Yes, we have received some feedback. We've had VSTL meetings and manufacturer meetings over the last couple months and presented these exact points to them. Regarding the test plan, test report, I don't expect that the changes to that would be very significant in terms of what the suggested format for the reports themselves are. We don't have great visibility, obviously, on what the impact of the timeline for testing against VVSG 2.0 is going to look like. But the expectation that, is that because the standard's basically been out there for people to look at, prepare for, to read and get familiar with over the last months in its final format, but over the last several years, really, that the hope is that the process is matured, the program's mature at this point, and that timelines for certifying against the new standard are not going to resemble what they did for at least the initial rollout of the program back in the 2000s, where there was some significant time that went into the certification of baseline voting systems.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for John?
Philip Stark, I have a question.
Mr. Stark?
Yes. You mentioned earlier that the number of people in the world who have the expertise to be vetting E2E verifiable cryptographic systems is pretty small. How are we going to establish the competence of the VSDLs for testing things like that? By my estimate, there's probably fewer than 20 people in the world who would be qualified to do work like that. Without source code disclosure, which is not required in the approved version of VVSG 2.0, I'm not sure how this is going to happen.
Thank you for your question. So the EAC is currently working on establishing that protocol development program. And so at this point, we're still in the early stages of actually working that out. And it's not fully understood if once the protocols have been developed and their implementation if that's going to be open source or not. That's one of the things being considered as part of that. In terms of preparing the VISTLs for the evaluation of the EDE protocol itself, I think, well, at least we're working with NIST NAVLAB on the handbook updates at this point. We don't have significant details regarding what the actual EDE implementation looks like because it's still in the early stage. Some competency aspects for that are going to have to be built into the accreditation for the labs, is what's expected. Regarding the limited number of experts, I think and that's true, I think it's going to be a function of evaluating that the protocol is working as intended, less of the fact of actually, checking the algorithm itself. Because I think if we've got a well-established EDE protocol with an algorithm that's been vetted by those that are in the know, and there'll be public working groups that are expected to be part of this process, that the algorithm itself will be sound by the time it's reached the implementation phase, and that the actual implementation of it is what will be checked by the VISTLs to ensure that it's, operating as intended.
So Stark, any follow-up?
Well, I mean, kind of know from examples out there like Swiss Post Seidel that, even checking that the protocols are correct is not trivial, separate from checking whether the protocols were implemented correctly. And I'm concerned that VVSG 2.0 is just not going to allow enough daylight on that for the people who have the technical competence to be able to review the protocols and the source code. But I guess we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Any more further questions for John? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Panik, for your briefing, and we will move on to the next item on our agenda.
Oh, I've got a couple slides left, Chairman Yaki.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Just a couple, 2 or 3 slides left. Let me share. The next element of the VVSG lifecycle policy is the update cadence. So regular updates to the VVSG are essential to ensuring that the standard remains agile and responsive to the needs of requiring jurisdictions and a continuously evolving technology and legal environment. A regular update cycle will reduce the overhead involved in proposing, reviewing, and approving minor changes to the VVSG. The overall number of changes should be smaller and should not generate as many comments, which is the hope. The program manuals and other program policy documents will not necessarily follow the same cadence. Updates to the standard during this regular cycle may incorporate items such as requests for interpretation, notices of clarification, errata, and other administrative changes. Additionally, requirements may be added or adjusted to address accessibility concerns, updates to common data formats to support more voting system functions, security updates to patch vulnerabilities, or other updates to accommodate new technology or standards. The EAC is proposing an update cycle of 18 or 24 months. If anybody has any comment or question, concerns regarding that.
Anything from the members? Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, Allison?
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to scroll back through HAVA, but I am remembering that it is we are required to meet at least annually in order to provide input on this. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on how the thinking is here that the Board of Advisors and the Standards Board's meeting cycle would be accommodated by or accommodate an update cycle of 18 to 24 months.
So as I commented on just previously, the hope is that the actual changes to the standard will be minimized as opposed to what we've seen in the recent past with the BVSG 2.0, which was like a complete rewrite and a significant amount of discussion and debate that went into that. And so that said, I think what you're saying is that it's, if we're proposing 18 or 24 months, that the boards may meet once, perhaps twice, in between those update cycles. We'll absolutely utilize the process as defined in HAVA for these updates. And so if that dictates that a longer period of the update cycle is necessary, we'll accommodate for that, for sure. Does that answer your question?
I was more thinking of a shorter period, but perhaps there's ways to kind of sequence these things where we consider some issues at various stages in the process and not necessarily wait to comment for 24 months.
Yeah, that may be entirely possible. And just one more slide. Sure. Just one more slide, Chairman. The last slide for the BVSG lifecycle policy is regarding configuration management. As the update cadence is meant to update the standard more frequently than in the past while maintaining backwards compatibility between major updates. There will be implications for states that specify particular versions of BVSG in their certification rules, or that only the latest version of BVSG be allowed for certification. So the EAC would like to ask for feedback on which of the following versioning schemas will allow states the greatest flexibility. Utilizing a minor version, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2 for this type of update, or a revision scheme where VVSG 2.0 remains as it is and we call it revision 1, revision 2, or perhaps 2021, 2022, that sort of thing. Any comments or feedback on that?
Questions, comments? Mr. Hatch?
Yeah, it's a little petty, but I think using the minor version would be easier as far as reference, being able to reference. So I kind of prefer the first version.
Thank you for that. Yes,
Anybody
Mr.
else?
Byrne. Mr. Byrne?
Just a quick, when you say when backwards compatibility cannot be maintained, the version will be updated. I'm just curious, do you have a threshold in mind for when that trigger is initiated for whether you can sustain backwards compatibility versus not?
Basically what we're looking at right now is backward compatibility is broken when requirements are modified or added that make current equipment, software, or testing obsolete. So with that, we would see a major revision to a VVSG 3.0. That's the expectation. So, along the lines of additions and that sort of thing.
I think the only concern I have on that is just for the states who have been in this position before for certified systems, that they may have certified systems in the field. They're the ones who are kind of driving this, especially because of the volunteer nature. So I always get concerned when we start sunsetting backwards, prior versions. I understand the evolution over time, but just being cognizant and aware of that, I think is the biggest concern.
Understood.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Pilger.
I wanted to comment on a prior topic, but if there's anyone else who's wanting to ask questions on this, I'll defer to them.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a question.
And who's that?
This is Keith Ingram.
Okay. Well, actually, I mean, since this is, if it's all in the same topic, the same general presentation, let's start, let's keep going in order. Mr. Pilger, why don't you go, and then Mr. Ingram, why don't you go after that?
Cool.
Well, I'm sorry, this is on a prior topic, but I've been thinking about how to raise it. So to the extent that the prior discussion of threats to election officials, and I'm sorry to interrupt this presentation by going back, but I wanted to find a place to say, to the extent that people on this call have been personally threatened, or their staff has been threatened, or their contractors have been threatened, the Department of Justice has a working group stood up on how to address this. You all see things, developments in that lane shortly. In the meantime, you can contact me with the information about those particular incidents, and I will get it to the right part of the FBI. So, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. This was not apropos of the current conversation. I just needed to find a place to say it before we finished. So thank you, and sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you for that valuable information, Mr. Pilger. Mr. Ingram, the floor is yours.
Yes, on that slide where there were 4 options for deprecating the 1.0 standards, what's the next step on making a decision on one of those 4, and will we have input in that further than today?
Yes, you can certainly have input on that beyond today. Next steps in terms of making the decision here is really to have a little bit more debate, I think, at least internally. And then if you've got any comments, please feel free to send them separately. We'll take all things into consideration regarding what's the best approach. I don't have a definitive answer to your question, but
so we should send our comments to Commissioner McCormick.
You can send them to myself. That would be fine, I think.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Any other questions or comments with regard to the presentation by Mr. Panic?
I have one.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, would it be possible to share these slides with us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions?
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yeah, just a follow-up question on that earlier. And I don't want to try to pin you down on something that may be premature, but did you say whether there is a timetable in any way attached to the decisions on deprecation? Or is this just a sort of very open-ended discussion at this point?
I would say the latter. It's an open-ended discussion at this point.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Panic, for your presentation. Much appreciated. Thank you for sharing your slides with us. We will now move on to our federal partners. First, a discussion from our friends at NIST, Sharon Laskowski and Kevin Mangold. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Yaki. I'm going to introduce you, Kevin. And good afternoon. Many of you know me, but for those of you that don't, I'm Sharon Laskowski. I've been working on the voting project since 2002 at NIST, since HAVA. And recently, actually March 7th, an executive order came in calling out NIST to work on looking at barriers and recommendations to promoting access to voting. In particular section, in particular in one section. So I'd like to introduce Kevin Mangold, who's joined our team in the NIST voting program, and he's going to give you a thumbnail sketch about what that's all involved, and we'd like your input on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Kevin Mangold. I'm a researcher in the Information Technology Lab at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I want to draw your attention to the information in your packet regarding NIST's response to the Executive Order number 14019 on promoting access to voting. I, along with my colleagues Carrie Ann Buchanan and Sharon Laskowski at NIST, have been working on a response to Section 7 of the Executive Order. Last week, on June 16th, we posted a request for information to the Federal Register seeking information about barriers to private and independent voting for voters with disabilities, including access to voter registration, voting technology, voting by mail, polling locations, and poll worker training. Your feedback will be invaluable for informing NIST's development of recommendations. To provide feedback, you can submit comments directly on regulations.gov. Also, if you have any questions, you can contact me directly at kevin.mangold@nist.gov, and I can try and put this information in the chat. Just wanted to thank you all again today for your time, and we hope to see your comments soon.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the NIST team members for the info. And I just wanted to tell the Board of Advisors as well that there's a 14-member committee that the White House has stood up related to the executive order that they're speaking to. I've been asked to serve on that committee. There's someone else on this group of individuals that is also on there, but I won't call her out. She doesn't want to be. And it would be helpful if there's information that we could pass along with respect to our role in this as well. I would love to hear from members as well. Not at this meeting, Mr. Chairman, but if they wanted to contact me down the road.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Now we know why you're continuing to be so busy. Great, good work. Congratulations to you. Any other comments or questions from the membership? Seeing none, we will move on to a cybersecurity briefing from CISA with Jeff Hale. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the board. I'd like to thank you, Chairman, and the EAC for the opportunity to brief you today. Again, I am Jeff Hale from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Next slide, please. CISA, we are the nation's risk advisor. We sit at the nexus of the intelligence community, law enforcement, cyber threat information, physical security reporting, and our job is to aggregate, assess, and provide that information out to different groups of stakeholders. My job is to focus on election security. Our goal is to ensure that the election community has all the necessary information and tools to adequately assess risk and protect, detect, and recover from those risks. We are the sector risk management agency that came with the designation of election infrastructure as critical infrastructure. Candidly, that has helped internally to CISA, help us prioritize delivery of cybersecurity and physical security services and assessments, which we've been able to conduct over 1,000 for stakeholders across the country. Next slide, please. Two recent products, at least recent since the last meeting of the Board of Advisors. We worked with our partners at the FBI and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to meet our obligations for Executive Order 13848. This was a determination on foreign efforts to influence and interfere with elections. We had no indication that any foreign actor attempted to alter any technical aspect of the voting process in 2020 US elections. That said, there were broad Russian and Iranian campaigns targeting multiple sectors that did compromise county networks and other networks related to the administration of elections, but they did not materially affect the integrity of the data needed to conduct an election. Next slide, please. From our position, we continue to see the threat landscape across the election sector as heightened and growing. From 2016, where there was Russian advanced persistent threat actors, searching state and county networks for vulnerabilities and the activity that happened on Illinois and counties in Florida, to 2020, where we saw 2 advanced persistent threat actors exploring county networks and conducting mis- and disinformation campaigns to affect the confidence in the election. You can see an example of some Iranian disinformation that was reported, where they spoofed an account to look like the Proud Boys and appear in a threatening manner to intimidate voters and believe that election infrastructure was compromised. We continue to be wary of the threat and risks of ransomware and its ability to impact elections and the administration of elections. Recent events like the Colonial Pipeline are very relevant to how elections can also operate between their business IT networks and the impact on the operational technology used to run elections. So we help as CISA to try and provide the best practices, capabilities, and information to implement defenses to secure your systems from those types of risks. Another example worth bringing up is enemies of the people. I heard the discussion of threats and risks to election officials and their physical being. Other countries took notice and stood up a false site, the enemies of the people site, to appearing to be domestic individuals with the intent of threatening and doxing people across the election community, vendors, election officials, federal officials. The FBI took action to remove those sites, but they would pop up occasionally. But it's an example of how U.S. elections have taken great interest of our adversaries as well. Next slide, please. Some of the simple activities that we focus on here at CISA in helping local election officials to advance the security posture of their elections is understanding and improving their defenses to their susceptibility and defenses to phishing. This is still the primary vector by which a lot of compromises occur, including ransomware. We work to help armed election officials with an understanding of what their vulnerability posture may be, so that they can talk to their county IT or take action on those vulnerabilities themselves. Because oftentimes we've seen critical vulnerabilities left open for well extended beyond 30 days or when known patches are available. We have teams that go around and help to understand the vulnerabilities of the network structure, to help securely configure their systems and ability to operate. Next slide, please. To help implement network segmentation so that compromises on one part of a county network don't necessarily impact the ability for the elections to be administered, and to help author and implement incident response plans for both physical and cyber incidents. Next slide, please. We, as I said, we sit at an inflection point for a lot of sources of input on threat and risk. And so we author election risk assessments where they are valuable for both critical infrastructure operators and policymakers. We have partnered with the EAC to host the CISA EAC Election Security Risk Profile Tool, which is a tool aimed at local election officials to be able to run their own security controls to understand what simple steps can be taken to advance their security posture and help to simplify the sometimes overwhelming order of operations in strengthening your security. Next slide, please. Again, CISA provides no-cost services to election officials. This is where we hear a lot of value is provided. We recommend starting with things like remote vulnerability scanning, our cyber hygiene program that looks at your internet-facing presence and helps you understand what vulnerabilities are observable. Going a little deeper, we like to encourage requesting a remote penetration test so that individuals know how vulnerable their network is and how the structure of their network can be pivoted through to access different components and maintain persistence. Other assessments, things like critical product evaluations. This is an open-ended vulnerability test that's really aimed at election vendors. We have been running this out of Idaho National Labs, although it's a CISA assessment, where it's basically giving some of the nation's top vulnerability researchers the ability to crack on these systems and give detailed reports on how to address and resolve some of these persistent risks. We're also the organization that funds the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center and more than 100 Albert sensors across the country, where we get that data on what types of attacks are targeting our internet-facing systems across elections. Next slide, please. New priorities that we're going out and engaging election officials is a .gov top-level domain. So the end of your website doesn't have to end in .com or .us. It can end in .gov. We believe this is important because this is a managed top-level domain. That means that only government organizations are able to request this. So it affords you an opportunity to be a trusted source of information so that individuals receiving emails or visiting your website know that you are the official government organization for elections in your jurisdiction. We believe that this is an important exercise in trust for election officials and the public, and we're happy to offer this at no cost, as opposed to previously $400 a year. Next slide, please. We, every year, for the past 4 years, have been hosting a national tabletop exercise. We hope all election officials watching this are able to participate this year. It is July 13th through 15th. We've had thousands of participants before. If you cannot make that, we encourage you to request individual trainings with us. We conduct trainings on ransomware, phishing, building trust through secure practices, and we have an online platform called Federal Virtual Training Environment with election security as an IT manager that you can take at any time on your own. Next slide, please. That's it for today. I'm happy to take any questions about how CISA can support election officials.
Mr. Condos. Secretary Condos.
Thank you, Jeff, and as always, thank you for your support of states, local, and county election officials. The next to last slide said that the tabletop exercise is July 13th to the 15th. Has that been communicated to us? Because I don't recall seeing anything, but maybe I just missed it.
An invite has gone out, but of course, Secretary Condos, we are happy to redistribute.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's as I said earlier, CISA has been a trusted partner for at least our state, and I think I can probably say that about across the country. The services and resources that have been provided by CISA over the last 4 years as we've worked together have been invaluable, and I think you've helped make our systems hardened and systems with integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. And I just wanted to echo Jeff, Secretary Condos's comments about the help from CISA. It's been great. But I do want to mention one thing about the .gov website piece. You know, that initially, and the feedback that we got from our internal security team on our networks was that you'll never get it. It's impossible. It's going to take forever. You know, there's all sorts of challenges. You guys have cleared all of that up. And I just wanted to give you a shout out to say that that was so smooth. The process was great, and more election officials should be encouraged to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Byrne?
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, well, good afternoon, Jeff. Quick question. So the slide next to your last one, you're talking about the training opportunities, and have you all explored the idea of training up state and local election officials about the risk management framework and how to apply it into their own environments, just like we have to do at the federal level based on relative security classifications? And then I wonder also if there's an opportunity for DHS and the EAC to work more closely together to help leverage the grants to because there does come with a substantial cost, as I'm well versed with in terms of our online system. But I just wonder if that's also an opportunity that you have had a chance to explore with the EAC, or perhaps that's something that we could explore, or is there any big rocks that I'm missing on that issue?
Thank you, David. So to the first, we do have trainings on our federal virtual training environment platform on risk management framework and using risk discipline as an approach. We have not prioritized that with election officials, but we'd be happy to do so for any election officials who are interested. To the latter, we are happy to support in whatever way. EAC is certainly a strong partner of ours, so whatever they ask of us, we're happy to be supportive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Logan.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to real quickly echo the comments that Neil made on the .gov platform and transition, and in particular to thank you personally, Jeff, for intervening in our work on that. We've been working on that for quite some time, and as Neil indicated, you have streamlined that and got it through. So we are there now and making the transition, and real pleased to be aboard with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Hale from the members? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Hale, for your presentation and for the great work of your agency during the last election and continuing. So now for the drum roll, I would like to ask Mr. Scholler to announce the results of the runoff for chair, if you're prepared. Mr. Scholler?
I am prepared. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Election Certification Committee, I'm here to announce the results of the runoff election for chair of this committee. I do want to remind everyone that in terms of proxy votes, Chairman Yaki had 2 proxy votes on behalf of Mr. David Cladney, Mr. Marc Guthrie, and Mr. Marc Guthrie had 1 proxy vote for Mr. Jim Dickinson. The results of the election for chair are 12 votes for Mr. Keith Ingram and 15 votes for Alice Sue McLaughlin. And with the new results, the Board of Advisors has elected Alice Sue McLaughlin as the new chair for the board. Congratulations, Alice Sue. And that is
McLaughlin, would you like to do it? Thank you very much, Mr. Scholler. Members of the committee, your duties are discharged. You did so faithfully and in an exciting manner. And we didn't have to wait 2 weeks to figure it out. Ms. McLaughlin, would you like to make any comments?
I will. I will just say that Keith and I will be working together. Keith is a well-respected professional on the Board of Advisors, and as are you all. I want to actually, I've been reflecting throughout the course of this meeting on something that Philip Stark said earlier. He referenced the fact that he received threats from having been marred by the dust and sweat and blood of the arena from being up in the New Hampshire audit. And while it's election officials that certainly have been in the crossfire and have been before, and unfortunately, I imagine will be again, this is public service, and we all acquire some of that dust and sweat and blood from doing the work that we do. And we're all in this for the right reasons. And we're all in this for the health of our democracy. And I am so delighted to work with all of you. And over the course of the next year, I'm really excited to be able to do some work here to really surface, as I mentioned earlier, some of the talents and the expertise that members of this board bring, and to really help serve as a matchmaker, myself and the rest of the executive committee, between the needs of the EAC for our input and our expertise and what we all uniquely have to bring. So let's continue our work. I am so excited to be able to do that work in person next time.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Well, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Moore, Mr. Hatch, you will be sworn in as the new officers by Commissioner McCormick. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman Yaki. So if all three of you will raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Gregory Moore,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Back to you, Chairman. You're still muted.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, and for all your colleagues who have joined us here today. Thank all the members of the Board of Advisors for sticking with this in a very unique time. When I was elected 2 years ago, I thought, oh, it's going to be so much fun. We'll have our multiple days. We're going to pick cool locations to go to, and instead, you know, I'm here in my suit and my gym shorts to preside over this for the last 2 years. But we've stuck through it. This has been, I think, an important time for all of us, for all the work that all of you have done in the 2020 election and what you'll be doing for the future. I like to think that probably my greatest legacy is going to be the fact that I tapped Allison in line at breakfast one day to ask her to serve on the executive board. But I also like to say that, you know, involving all of you, being with all of you has been a great privilege. I've been on the board now for a number of years. Having served as chair during these interesting times has been great, but all the work that all of you have done has been a privilege and an honor to serve with all of you. So with that, let's keep the good work going. Let's keep America voting. Let's make sure we safeguard our elections and ensure that as many people that can, should, and will vote, because democracy is a precious gift that our founders gave to us. And you keep that flame alive for all of us in all of our different ways. So with that, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. No one wants to do it? Y'all want to stay on for a while? We all chat.
So move, Mr. Chair. Marc Guthrie.
Mr. Guthrie is moved. Is there a second?
I second. Barb Simons.
Ms. Simons seconds. Without objection, the annual meeting of the Board of Advisors is now adjourned, and we'll see you again in about a year. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, staff, for a great job. A great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.